You know what the problem with being a technologically advanced spacefaring civilization is? Eventually your stuff breaks down. And when your stuff is a massive orbital station that keeps 3 billion sentient beings from becoming very expensive space debris, breaking down becomes what the humans would call a bit of a pickle. My name is Vex'thari, and I'm what you might generously call the Chief Operations Officer of Harmony Station, though Chief Panic Coordinator would be more accurate on most days. Our station, suspended in the gravitational sweet spot between 3 gas giants, had been humanity's first major diplomatic contact with what they charmingly referred to as the galactic community. 3 years ago, when their rickety little exploration vessel had limped into our space, trailing debris and what appeared to be several small fires, we'd done what any civilized species would do. We'd helped them out, shared some technology, and signed a few trade agreements. Standard first contact protocol, really. What we hadn't expected was that these humans, these bizarre little bipedal creatures with their alarmingly short lifespans, and their tendency to solve problems by hitting them with increasingly larger objects, would become, well, friends. But friendship, as I was rapidly learning, came with certain complications. "Sir," announced my second-in-command, Vex'thari, her forearms gesticulating in what I'd learned to recognize as barely controlled panic. "The quantum resonance chambers are down to 12% efficiency. And the backup systems?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way her chromatophores were shifting toward that lovely shade of "we're all going to die." "Also failing. The cascade failure from the main array has contaminated the entire network. At current degradation rates, we have perhaps 6 standard cycles before complete system failure." I leaned back in my command chair, which was one of the few pieces of furniture designed to accommodate my species' rather generous posterior section. 6 cycles. In human terms, that was roughly 2 weeks. 2 weeks before our life support systems, our artificial gravity, our defensive grids, and our atmospheric processors all decided to take a permanent vacation. "Have we tried turning it off and on again?" I asked, because sometimes the classics work. "Sir, we've tried everything. The resonance crystals are degrading at a molecular level. We'd need to replace the entire array and—" She trailed off, which was never a good sign. And we don't have the industrial capacity to manufacture quantum resonance crystals. The only facility capable of producing them was destroyed during the Kethmoran War 2 centuries ago." "Right, the Kethmoran War. The one where half the galaxy had decided that genocide was a perfectly reasonable solution to a trade dispute. The one that had left vast swaths of space uninhabitable and had wiped out most of the advanced manufacturing capability in 3 entire spiral arms." "So what you're telling me," I said slowly, "is that we're operating on 200-year-old technology that we can't repair, can't replace, and can't live without." "That's an accurate assessment, sir." I stared out the viewport at the swirling gas giants below. "Beautiful, really. Shame I wouldn't be around much longer to appreciate them." "Sir?" Vex'thari's voice was carefully neutral. "There is one option." I turned back to her. "I'm listening. The humans. They've been very creative with their solutions to our technical problems. Remember when they helped us with the waste recycling system?" I did remember. The humans had taken one look at our perfectly functional, if somewhat inefficient, waste processing plant, and had somehow turned it into a system that not only processed waste, but also generated enough excess energy to power half the civilian sector. They'd called it getting 2 birds with 1 stone, which was apparently a human idiom about achieving multiple goals through efficient violence. Charming people. "You want me to ask the humans to fix our quantum resonance array?" "I want you to ask the humans to save our lives, sir." I sighed, a sound that in my species involves several internal gas bladders and usually indicates profound resignation. "Very well. Open a channel to Earth. High priority." The communication array hummed to life, and after a few moments, the familiar face of Admiral Harrison Burke appeared on the main screen. Harrison was one of the humans we'd grown to know quite well over the past 3 years, mainly because he had the dubious honor of being their chief diplomatic liaison to our little corner of the galaxy. "Vex'thari." Harrison's face split into that peculiar facial expression humans called a smile. "Good to see you, old friend. How's everything on the station?" "Catastrophically failing," I replied, because diplomacy had never been my strong suit. "We have a bit of a situation, Harrison." The smile faded. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where everyone dies if we don't fix it in 2 weeks." Harrison leaned forward, his expression shifting to what I'd learned to recognize as his business face. "Tell me everything." So I did. I explained about the quantum resonance array, about the cascade failure, About the fact that we were essentially flying around in a museum piece that was finally reaching the end of its operational life. I explained about the Kethmoran War, about the loss of manufacturing capability, about the fact that we were essentially asking them to solve a problem that had stumped the combined scientific minds of 17 different species for 2 centuries. When I finished, Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know, Vex'thari, when most people ask us for help, they usually want something simple. Like, can you help us build a bridge? Or can you help us fight off some pirates? You're asking us to essentially rebuild your entire power grid with technology we've never seen before, in 2 weeks." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I'm asking." Harrison grinned. "I'll get our best people on it. We'll have a team to you within 48 hours. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my first clue that I had severely underestimated what I was getting myself into. Chapter 2. The Cavalry Arrives. With questionable qualifications. 48 hours later, I was standing in Docking Bay 7, watching a human transport ship maneuver into position with what I was beginning to recognize as characteristic human precision. Which is to say, they got the job done, but not without making it look like they were perpetually on the verge of accidentally destroying everything in a 50-kilometer radius. "Sir," said Vex'thari, consulting her datapad, "the human vessel is requesting permission to dock." "Granted," I said, then paused. "How many humans are they sending?" "According to the manifest, 12. To solve a problem that had stumped teams of hundreds of our brightest minds. Either the humans were incredibly confident in their abilities, or they had a very casual relationship with the concept of survival. The transport ship settled into the docking bay with a series of mechanical groans that would have sent any sane engineer running for the emergency pods. The airlock hissed open and outstepped what was quite possibly the most motley collection of humans I'd ever seen. The first one through was a tall, lanky human with prematurely gray hair, and the kind of expression that suggested he'd seen too much, and found most of it amusing. Behind him came a shorter, stockier human carrying what appeared to be a toolbox the size of a small vehicle. Then came a woman with burns on her arms and a smile that suggested she enjoyed setting things on fire for professional reasons. Then, you know what? Let me just say that if you'd asked me to assemble a team of humans to save a space station, this particular collection of individuals would not have been my first choice. They looked less like elite technical specialists, and more like the kind of people you'd find in a human establishment they called a dive bar at 3 a.m. The tall one approached me with that confident stride that humans seemed to default to when they were either supremely competent or completely insane. In my experience, it was usually impossible to tell which until after the explosions. "You must be Vex'thari," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm Dr. Felix Carver, lead engineer on this little adventure. This is my team." I shook his hand, noting the calloused palms and the faint scent of ozone that seemed to follow him around. "Dr. Carver, I have to ask, are you sure 12 people are going to be enough?" Felix grinned. "Depends on how you define enough, I suppose. We might not solve your problem exactly the way you're expecting." "What do you mean?" "Well," said the stocky human, setting down his massive toolbox with a thud that made the deck plates ring. "We looked at your technical specifications on the way over. Your quantum resonance array is a beautiful piece of engineering. Really top-notch work. Very elegant." "Thank you," I said, though something in his tone suggested this wasn't going to be a simple compliment. "It's also completely insane," continued the human, who I now noticed was wearing a name tag that read, Bobby, Demolitions. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's brilliant. But it's the kind of brilliant that makes you wonder if the people who designed it had ever actually met entropy. "I'm sorry, what?" Felix held up a hand. "What Bobby means is that your system is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also incredibly fragile. It's like, imagine if you built a watch out of soap bubbles. Beautiful, functional, but one wrong move and the whole thing falls apart. And you can fix it?" "Fix it?" Felix laughed. "Oh, we can do better than that. We can make it so it never breaks again." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Well," said the woman with the burns, who I was beginning to suspect was their explosives expert, "we can't manufacture quantum resonance crystals. But we can make something better." "Better?" "Fusion-powered plasma containment matrices with distributed load balancing and redundant failsafes," said a fourth human, who had apparently been listening to our conversation while simultaneously dismantling a section of the docking bay's control panel. "Should give you about 10 times the power output with roughly 0 maintenance requirements." I stared at them. "You want to replace our quantum resonance array with, what did you call them?" "Fusion reactors," said Felix cheerfully. Small ones. Well, relatively small. We'll need to install about 50 of them throughout the station to match your current power requirements. 50 fusion reactors. Give or take. I looked at Vex'thari, who was staring at the humans with the expression of someone who'd asked for a glass of water and been offered a fire hose. Is this safe? Define safe, said Bobby. Will it explode? Everything explodes if you try hard enough, said the woman with the burns. The trick is making sure it only explodes when you want it to. That's not exactly reassuring. Look, said Felix, and his tone had shifted from cheerful to serious. Your current system is going to fail in 2 weeks. When it does, everyone on this station dies. Our solution might be a little unconventional, but it'll work. And more importantly, it'll keep working for the next few thousand years. I considered this. On the one hand, the humans were proposing to essentially rebuild the entire power infrastructure of our station, using technology that they'd apparently invented on the way over. On the other hand, the alternative was death. How long will it take? I asked. 48 hours, said Felix. 48 hours to install 50 fusion reactors? We work fast. I looked around at the team of humans, who were already unpacking equipment and consulting data pads and generally giving the impression that they were about to take apart my space station and put it back together, using parts they'd bought at a hardware store. Very well, I said, but I want to be kept informed of everything you're doing. Every modification, every installation, every... Sure thing, said Felix, already walking toward the exit. Fair warning, though. You might want to evacuate the civilian sectors. There's going to be a lot of noise. What kind of noise? The kind that comes from cutting through bulkheads with plasma torches. And with that, they were gone, leaving me standing in the docking bay with Vex'thari and a growing sense that I'd just made either the best decision of my life or the last decision I'd ever make. Chapter 3. The humans get to work, and physics gets nervous. You know what the problem with humans is? They don't understand the concept of impossible. I learned this approximately 6 hours after Dr. Carver and his team had begun their work, when Vex'thari burst into my office with her chromatophores flashing the particular shade of blue that indicated either imminent death or complete bewilderment. Sir, she said, her voice pitched higher than usual, you need to see this. I followed her through the corridors of Harmony Station, noting as we went that the usual background hum of the quantum resonance array had been replaced by a new sound, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Are they using hammers? I asked. Among other things, Vex'thari replied grimly. We arrived at what had once been Auxiliary Power Distribution Center 7, which the humans had apparently decided was the perfect place to begin their modifications. The scene that greeted us was, well, controlled chaos would be generous. Absolute bedlam might be more accurate. The humans had somehow managed to cut a hole in the deck plating large enough to drive a small vehicle through. Through this hole, they were lowering what appeared to be a massive cylindrical device that was humming with barely contained energy. The device itself was covered in warning labels in at least 12 different languages, most of which seemed to boil down to, "Do not touch, will kill you." What, I said carefully, is that? Felix looked up from where he was directing the installation with the kind of casual expertise that suggested he'd done this sort of thing before. Fusion reactor number 1, he said cheerfully. Isn't she beautiful? I stared at the device, which was roughly the size of a cargo container, and appeared to be held together with what looked suspiciously like metal tape and optimism. That's a fusion reactor? Type 7 plasma containment matrix with integrated magnetic field generators and automatic fuel cycling, Bobby called out from somewhere inside the hole. Rated for continuous operation at 12 terawatts with a projected operational lifespan of about 3,000 years. And you built this... when? Yesterday, said the woman with the burns, who I'd learned was named Rita, and who was apparently their chief nuclear engineer. Well, we built the first one yesterday. We've been manufacturing them on the way over. Manufacturing them? On a transport ship? Humans are very good at making things, Felix explained. It's sort of our thing. I watched as 2 more humans emerged from the hole, carrying what appeared to be a control console that was sparking intermittently. They set it down, hit it with a wrench, and the sparking stopped. Is that supposed to work like that? I asked. Percussive maintenance, said Rita. Very effective technique. You'd be surprised how many problems you can solve by hitting them with the right tool. And if that doesn't work, then we use bigger tools. I was beginning to understand why the humans had been so confident about their timeline. They weren't approaching this problem like engineers. They were approaching it like, well, like humans. Sir, said Vex'thari, consulting her datapad. The power output readings from that device are unusual. Unusual how? It's generating more power than our entire quantum resonance array, and it's not even fully activated yet. I looked at Felix, who was wiping his hands on a rag that had probably been white at some point in its life. Dr. Carver, exactly how much power is this thing going to produce? This one? About 12 terawatts, like Bobby said. But don't worry, we've got it throttled way down. It could probably put out 50 terawatts if we really pushed it. And you're installing 50 of these. Actually, we decided to go with 60. Better to have too much power than not enough. I did some quick mental math. 60 reactors at 12 terawatts each. That was more power than some star systems generated. What exactly are you planning to do with all that power? I asked. Felix grinned. We thought you might ask that. Rita, show him the upgrade list. Rita produced a datapad and handed it to me. I scrolled through it, my eyes widening with each line item. Gravity generators? I read aloud. Plasma shielding? Quantum communication arrays? Automated defense systems? What is all this? Well, said Felix, we figured as long as we were upgrading your power systems, we might as well upgrade everything else too. No point in having all that extra juice if you're not going to use it. I continued reading. Atmospheric processors capable of terraforming entire planets. Industrial replicators? Faster-than-light communication networks? This isn't a repair job. This is a complete rebuild. Pretty much, Bobby agreed from inside the hole. Your old systems were functional, but they were also kind of limited. Limited how? Well, said Rita, for starters, your defensive capabilities were basically non-existent. One moderately determined pirate crew could have taken this station apart with a few well-placed shots. We've never had any problems with pirates. That's because you've been lucky. But luck runs out. Our upgrades will give you enough firepower to hold off a small fleet. I stared at the list. This says you're installing particle beam cannons. 12 of them, Felix confirmed. Plus missile launchers, point defense systems, and something we like to call the big gun. What's the big gun? Felix and Rita exchanged glances. Let's just say it's the kind of weapon you really don't want to have to use. And you're installing all of this. Why? Because we can, said Felix simply. And because you're our friends. Friends don't let friends get blown up by pirates. I looked around at the chaos surrounding us. More humans had appeared from somewhere, and they were installing equipment with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. A lot. Dr. Carver, I said, exactly how many space stations have you humans upgraded? This is our first, actually, but we've done plenty of ships, and a few planets. And there was that one star system, but that was more of a special case. You've upgraded star systems? Just the one. The locals were having trouble with some particularly aggressive neighbors. We helped them out. I had a sinking feeling that I was about to learn something about humanity that I wasn't entirely prepared for. What kind of help? Felix's grin widened. The kind that solved their neighbor problem permanently. And there it was. The moment when I realized that asking the humans for help might have been the most dangerous decision I'd ever made. Not because they couldn't do what they promised, but because they were probably going to do a lot more than what they promised. Chapter 4. The neighbors drop by, uninvited. I was having what humans call a moment in my office when the proximity alarms started screaming. It had been 18 hours since the humans had begun their work, and in that time, they'd managed to install 23 fusion reactors, upgrade the gravity generators, replace half the atmospheric processors, and somehow convince the automatic food dispensers to start producing what they called coffee. The station was humming with more power than it had ever had, and the humans were showing no signs of slowing down, which naturally was when everything went to hell. Sir! Vex'thari's voice crackled over the intercom. We've got incoming ships, multiple contacts bearing 27 Mark IV. I made my way to the command center, where the main display was showing a tactical plot that made my blood run cold. 12 ships, arranged in a classic attack formation, moving toward the station at high speed. Kethmoran vessels, announced my tactical officer, his voice tight with fear. Raider class, heavily armed. Of course. The Kethmoran. The same species that had managed to nearly destroy galactic civilization 2 centuries ago, and who had spent the intervening time raiding, pillaging, and generally making life unpleasant for anyone who had the misfortune to cross their path. What do they want? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They're transmitting, said my communications officer. Standard raider demands. They want all our technology, all our resources, and... He paused, looking uncomfortable. And? And they want us to surrender the humans. I felt my stomach drop. They know about the humans? Apparently, they're specifically demanding that we hand over the human technical specialists and their equipment. This was bad. This was very, very bad. The Kethmoran weren't just raiders, they were collectors. They specialized in capturing advanced technology, and the people who understood it. If they got their hands on the humans and their fusion reactors... Sir, said Vex'thari, our defensive systems are still offline. The humans haven't finished the weapons installations. How long until they're ready? Dr. Carver estimated another 12 hours for the basic systems, and... We don't have 12 hours, I interrupted, watching the tactical plot as the raider ships closed distance. At current speed, they'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. I opened a channel to the human work teams. Dr. Carver, we have a problem. Felix's voice came back immediately, sounding distracted. What kind of problem? Because we're right in the middle of installing reactor number 37, and if we stop now, we're going to have to start over. The kind of problem that involves 12 heavily armed ships demanding we surrender you and your team. There was a pause. Then, that's inconvenient. What kind of ships? Kethmoran raiders. They want your technology. Another pause. Well, they can't have it. We're not done with it yet. Dr. Carver, I don't think you understand the situation. These aren't merchants or diplomats. The Kethmoran are killers. They'll destroy the station if we don't comply. Will they now? Felix's voice had changed, taking on a tone I'd never heard before. That seems rather rude. Bobby, did you hear that? Bobby's voice came through the comm, sounding cheerful. Sure did. Sounds like we've got some uninvited guests. Rita, what's the status on the point defense systems? Offline, but I can probably get them working in about 10 minutes. And the main batteries? Give me 20 minutes. We don't have 20 minutes, I said desperately. They'll be in weapons range in 15. Then we'll have to use the backup plan, Felix said calmly. What backup plan? Rita, fire up reactor number 15, the big one. The big one? I asked. I thought they were all the same size. Oh, they are, Felix replied. Except for number 15. That one's special. I had a bad feeling about this. Special how? Special in the sense that it's not actually a reactor. Rita's voice came through the comm. It's a weapon. A weapon? Yeah, we figured you might need some firepower on short notice, so we built you a little something extra. Think of it as a really big gun. I stared at the tactical display, where the Kethmoran ships were now less than 10 minutes away. How big? Big enough, Felix said. Trust me. And you know what? I did trust him. Which was probably a mistake, but at that point, I didn't have a lot of other options. Fine, I said. Do whatever you're going to do. Already on it, Rita replied. Power levels are climbing. We should be ready to fire in about 5 minutes. I switched channels to address the Kethmoran ships. This is Vex'thari, commander of Harmony Station. You are entering sovereign space without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The reply came back almost immediately, broadcast on all frequencies with the kind of arrogance that the Kethmoran were famous for. Pathetic herbivore, you are in no position to make demands. Surrender the humans and their technology, or we will take them from your wreckage. I looked at the tactical plot. The lead Kethmoran ship was now close enough that I could see the details of its weapon systems. Plasma cannons, missile launchers, and what looked like a heavy particle beam array. Any one of those ships could have destroyed Harmony Station without breaking a sweat. Sir, said Vex'thari, the human weapon is powering up. Energy readings are significant. How significant? According to these readings, it's drawing power from all 60 fusion reactors simultaneously. I felt my knees go weak. All 60? That's impossible, said my tactical officer. No weapon could channel that much power without... He was interrupted by a sound I'd never heard before. A deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to come from the very structure of the station itself. The lights flickered, and for a moment, I could have sworn I felt the artificial gravity fluctuate. Rita, Felix's voice came through the comm. You might want to aim for the big one. Already locked on, Rita replied. Firing in 3, 2, 1. What happened next was difficult to describe. The main display showed a brief flash of light from the station, followed by a beam of energy that was so intense it overwhelmed the visual sensors. When the display cleared, the lead Kethmoran ship was simply gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone. As in no longer present in this dimension. The remaining 11 ships seemed to be having the same reaction I was, because they all stopped dead in space. Well, said Felix cheerfully, that worked better than expected. I stared at the tactical plot. What did you do? Oh, that? That was just a focused gravitational pulse. Basically, we convinced a small section of space-time that it would be more comfortable somewhere else. You erased a ship from existence? Temporarily relocated it, Rita corrected. It's probably fine, wherever it is. The Kethmaran ships were moving again, but this time they were moving away from the station. Fast! This is not over, herbivore, came the transmission from the remaining ships. The Kethmaran will remember this insult. We will return with a proper fleet. Looking forward to it, Felix replied on the open channel. Next time, maybe call ahead. I watched as the raider ships jumped to hyperspace, their threat displays flickering out one by one. We were safe. For now. Dr. Carver, I said. What exactly have you done to my station? Made it better, he replied. Much better. You might want to update your diplomatic status, though. I have a feeling your neighbors are going to start taking you a lot more seriously. I looked at the tactical display where the energy readings from the human weapon were still climbing. How much more firepower are you installing? Oh, we're just getting started. By the time we're done, you'll be able to hold off a battle fleet. And if they come back with more than a battle fleet? Felix was quiet for a moment. Then we'll have to get creative. I had a sinking feeling that I was about to find out exactly what human creativity looked like when applied to the art of war. Chapter 5. The humans finish their work and accidentally start an arms race. 36 hours after the Kethmoran attack, I was standing in what had once been the central hub of Harmony Station, staring at something that no longer bore much resemblance to the place I'd called home for the past 15 years. The humans had finished their work. Sort of. So, I said to Felix, who was standing next to me with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just solved a particularly interesting puzzle. You want to explain to me why my space station now has a bridge that looks like it belongs on a warship? Because, said Felix, gesturing at the array of displays, control panels, and what appeared to be a tactical hologram table. It essentially is a warship now. A very large, very powerful warship that happens to have excellent living quarters and a really good cafeteria. I walked over to the tactical display, which was showing real-time sensor data from approximately half the star system. This is new. Long-range sensors, Bobby explained, looking up from where he was calibrating something that was humming ominously. We figured you'd want to know if anyone else was planning to drop by uninvited. And this? I pointed to a control panel that was labeled, in several languages, Planetary Defense Grid. Oh, that's for the orbital platforms, Rita said casually. We installed 12 of them around the system's major planets. Each one has enough firepower to sterilize a continent. I stared at her. You installed what? Orbital defense platforms. Fully automated, self-repairing, and equipped with enough weapons to make most people think twice about causing trouble in your neighborhood. When did you have time to build orbital platforms? We didn't build them, Felix said. We fabricated them, with the industrial replicators. The what? Industrial replicators. We installed 6 of them in the lower levels. They can manufacture pretty much anything you need, from starships to planets. I felt that familiar sensation of the universe sliding sideways. You can manufacture planets? Well, terraform them anyway. The replicators can produce all the necessary atmospheric processors, gravity generators, and ecological systems. Give us about a year and we can turn any rock into a garden world. I looked around at the transformed command center. Dr. Carver, exactly what have you done to my station? Felix smiled. We've turned it into the most powerful defensive installation in about 3 spiral arms. Your quantum resonance array was generating about 50 terawatts of power. Your new fusion grid is putting out over 700 terawatts. That's enough power to run a small civilization. Or a very large weapon, I said slowly. Or that, yes. I walked over to another console, this one labeled Fleet Command. Please tell me this doesn't do what I think it does. That depends, said Rita. What do you think it does? Controls a fleet of warships. Then yes, it does exactly what you think it does. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. How many ships, currently? About 50. But the shipyards are working on expanding that number. Shipyards? Automated shipyards. We built them into the asteroid belt. They're using raw materials from the local asteroids to construct a defensive fleet. Standard human design, but scaled up for your power requirements. I opened my eyes and looked at the tactical display again. Sure enough, there were new contacts scattered throughout the system. Ships that definitely hadn't been there a few days ago. These are warships, I said. Destroyer class mostly, Bobby confirmed. Fast, maneuverable, and heavily armed, perfect for system defense. And you built 50 of them in 2 days. The shipyards are very efficient. We should have another 50 ready by next week. I sat down heavily in the command chair, which had been upgraded to include what appeared to be targeting controls and a direct link to the station's weapon systems. Dr. Carver, I asked you to repair my power systems. You've turned my space station into a military fortress. Well, Felix said, we figured you might need it. Why? Because of them, Rita said, pointing to the long-range sensors. I looked at the display. There, at the very edge of sensor range, was a fleet of ships. A large fleet, moving in our direction. Kethmoran? I asked. Kethmoran, Felix confirmed. About 200 ships, including several dreadnoughts. They're taking your earlier response personally. I stared at the display. 200 ships. That was more than a raiding fleet. That was an invasion force. When will they arrive? About 6 hours, Bobby said. Maybe 7, depending on how fast they want to push their engines. And you think 50 destroyers can stop 200 ships? Oh, we're not planning to fight them with just the destroyers, Felix said. We're planning to fight them with the station. I looked at him. The station? The station. Take a look at the weapons display. I reluctantly activated the weapons console and my blood ran cold. The display showed weapon systems I'd never heard of, with names like gravitational collapse cannon and quantum singularity torpedo launcher and stellar compression array. What, I said carefully, is a stellar compression array? It's a weapon that can compress matter at the atomic level, Rita explained. Point it at a ship and you can reduce it to a marble. And you installed this on my station? We installed 12 of them, plus the other stuff. I scrolled through the weapons list. Antimatter mines? Temporal displacement bombs? What is a reality anchor? That one's experimental, Felix admitted. We're not entirely sure what it does, but the theoretical output is impressive. I stared at the display. You've turned my space station into a weapon of mass destruction. Mass destruction is such an ugly term, Felix said. We prefer comprehensive deterrent system. And if the Kethmoran fleet arrives and decides to fight anyway? Felix, Rita, and Bobby exchanged glances. Then we'll show them why picking fights with humans is generally considered a bad idea. I looked back at the tactical display, where the Kethmoran fleet was steadily approaching. 200 ships, including what looked like some of the largest warships I'd ever seen. And here I was, sitting in a space station that had been transformed into something that could probably destroy star systems. Dr. Carver, I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Shoot. Are you people actually engineers, or are you some kind of military specialists? Felix grinned. Both, actually. You see, humans have this tendency to approach engineering problems from what you might call a holistic perspective. We don't just fix things, we improve them. And when we improve things, we improve everything, including the ability to blow things up. Especially the ability to blow things up. It's sort of a core competency. I leaned back in my chair and tried to process what I was hearing. So when Admiral Burke said he was sending his best people, he sent his best people, Felix confirmed. We're just also his most dangerous people. I see. Look, Rita said, we know this is a lot to take in, but the reality is, your station was always going to be a target. The Kethmoran were always going to come for you eventually. The only question was whether you'd be ready for them. And now we are? Now you're ready for anything, Bobby said. Short of someone dropping a star on you, this station can handle pretty much any threat you're likely to face. I looked around at the transformed command center, at the weapons displays and the tactical systems and the fleet command controls. And after this is over? After we deal with the Kethmoran? After this is over, Felix said, you'll be the most powerful single military force in about a dozen star systems, which means you'll be in a position to keep the peace. Whether people want peace or not. Whether people want peace or not. I considered this. On the one hand, the idea of wielding that kind of power was terrifying. On the other hand, the alternative was letting the Kethmoran and others like them continue to terrorize innocent civilizations. Sir, Vex'thari's voice came through the intercom. The Kethmoran fleet has increased speed. They'll be here in 4 hours. Acknowledged, I replied. Then to Felix. Are we ready? Felix walked over to the main tactical display and began activating systems. Rita, bring all weapon systems online. Bobby, I want full power to the shields and the reality anchors. And someone wake up the fleet AI. Fleet AI? I asked. Oh, did we forget to mention that? The destroyer fleet has an integrated artificial intelligence system. Makes coordination much easier. A new voice suddenly filled the command center, female, calm, and utterly without emotion. Good morning, Commander Vex'thari. I am Arya, the automated response and intelligence assistant. I am currently coordinating the defense of this system. Hello, Arya, I said weakly. I have analyzed the approaching Kethmoran fleet and have developed several response scenarios. Would you like me to present them? I looked at Felix, who nodded. Go ahead, Arya. Scenario 1, diplomatic resolution. We broadcast a warning to the Kethmoran fleet, demonstrating our capabilities by destroying a few asteroids. Probability of success, 7%. That's not very encouraging. Scenario 2, defensive engagement. We allow the Kethmoran fleet to enter the system and engage them with our current forces. Probability of success, 94%. Estimated casualties, minimal to none. That's better. Scenario 3, preemptive strike. We intercept the Kethmoran fleet before they enter the system and destroy them completely. Probability of success, 99.7%. Estimated casualties, 0. And the difference between scenarios 2 and 3? In scenario 2, we fight a battle. In scenario 3, we prevent a war. I looked at the tactical display where the Kethmoran fleet was still approaching. Arya, what's your recommendation? Based on historical analysis of Kethmoran behavior patterns, they will interpret any defensive action as weakness and will return with larger forces. The most efficient solution is to eliminate the current threat completely, then broadcast the results to other potential aggressors. You're suggesting we destroy the entire fleet? I am suggesting we send a message that will prevent future conflicts. I turned to Felix. What do you think? Felix was quiet for a moment. The AI has a point. The Kethmoran respect strength and nothing else. If we just drive them off, they'll be back with more ships. But if we make an example of them, other potential raiders will think twice before threatening the system. Rita finished. I stared at the tactical display. 200 ships, thousands of Kethmoran warriors. All of them probably convinced that they were about to win an easy victory against a poorly defended space station. There's something else you should know, Felix said quietly. The Kethmoran aren't just raiders. They're slavers. Any survivors from the civilizations they attack get sold to the highest bidder. And the civilizations that don't survive get strip-mined for resources. I thought about the billions of innocent beings living on the planets throughout our system. I thought about the hundreds of other civilizations that the Kethmoran had destroyed over the centuries. I thought about the fact that, for the first time in galactic history, someone had the power to actually stop them. Arya, I said, implement Scenario 3. Acknowledged, initiating preemptive strike protocol. The next few minutes were probably the most surreal of my life. I sat in my command chair, watching as the human-designed systems took control of what had once been a peaceful space station and transformed it into an instrument of war. The destroyer fleet moved first, 50 ships accelerating toward the approaching Kethmoran fleet at speeds that should have been impossible. According to the display, they were using something called inertial dampening fields to ignore the usual limitations of physics. How fast are they going? I asked. About 30% of light speed, Bobby replied. They should intercept the Kethmoran fleet in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I watched as the tactical display tracked the approaching battle, showing the projected courses of both fleets. The Kethmoran ships were massive, heavily armed, and had been the terror of the galaxy for centuries. The human-designed destroyers were smaller, but they were moving with a precision and coordination that was almost hypnotic. Arya, I said, what's the plan? The destroyer fleet will engage the Kethmoran vanguard with conventional weapons while the main battle line is distracted. Meanwhile, the station's long-range systems will target the Kethmoran command vessels. And then? And then we demonstrate the consequences of threatening innocent civilizations. I looked at Felix. What exactly are you planning to do? Felix smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it wasn't a pleasant expression. We're going to show them why humans don't like bullies. Chapter 6. The Demonstration, or How to End a War in 20 Minutes. The thing about humans, I was rapidly learning, is that they approach warfare the same way they approach everything else, with a combination of brutal efficiency and an almost artistic sense of overkill. The battle, if you could call it that, lasted exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds. I know this because Arya was keeping track. First contact in 5 seconds, the AI announced calmly. Kethmoran fleet is attempting to adjust formation. On the tactical display, I watched as the 50 human destroyers met the Kethmoran vanguard. What happened next was, well, it was educational. The Kethmoran ships opened fire first, filling space with plasma bolts and missile barrages that would have been impressive against any conventional enemy. The human destroyers responded by doing something that I was beginning to recognize as characteristically human. They completely ignored the laws of physics. They're not dodging the plasma bolts, I observed. They're just not being hit by them. Probability manipulation fields, Rita explained. We convinced the universe that those particular plasma bolts would be more comfortable somewhere else. I stared at the display. You can do that? Humans can do that. We've been arguing with physics for centuries. Eventually we got good at it. The destroyer fleet moved through the Kethmoran vanguard like a school of fish through water, their weapon systems firing with mechanical precision. But these weren't conventional weapons. These were human weapons, which meant they were fundamentally unreasonable. What did that destroyer just do to that Kethmoran cruiser? I asked, watching as one of the enemy ships simply folded in on itself. Localized gravity well, Bobby said. Compressed it into a more manageable size. Is it still alive? Define alive. I decided I didn't want to know. The main Kethmoran battle line was responding now, their massive dreadnoughts bringing their primary weapons to bear. These were ships that had destroyed civilizations, had turned entire star systems into graveyards. Their weapons were capable of cracking planets. They fired. Incoming, Arya announced. Multiple Planet Killer class weapons targeted on the destroyer fleet. I held my breath. The Planet Killer beams struck the destroyer fleet and bounced off. Adaptive shielding, Felix explained. The ships analyze incoming weapons and adjust their defenses accordingly. Those particular beams are now the property of the destroyer fleet. What do you mean, property of the destroyer fleet? I mean we just stole their weapons and we're about to return them, with interest. What followed was the most one-sided battle in galactic history. The human destroyers began returning the Kethmoran weapons fire, except amplified by about 1,000%. Planet Killer beams that had been designed to destroy worlds struck the Kethmoran ships and did exactly what they were designed to do. Sir, Vex'thari said, her voice tight with shock. The Kethmoran command ship is transmitting. They're trying to surrender. I looked at Felix. What do you think? Felix consulted his datapad. Arya, how many civilizations have the Kethmoran destroyed in the past century? 47 confirmed, with an estimated total population of 12 billion sentient beings. How many survivors? Approximately 0. Felix looked at me. Your call, but personally, I don't think people who commit genocide get to surrender. I thought about those 12 billion beings. I thought about the civilizations that had been wiped out, the cultures that had been destroyed, the families that had been torn apart. I thought about the fact that the Kethmoran had never shown mercy to anyone. Arya, I said, ignore the surrender. Acknowledged. Continuing engagement. The battle continued for another 10 minutes, but it was less a battle than a systematic dismantling. The human destroyers moved through the Kethmoran fleet like surgeons, precisely targeting critical systems and reducing each ship to its component atoms. Status report, I requested. Kethmoran fleet effectiveness, 12% and falling. Destroyer fleet effectiveness, 100%. Estimated time to complete elimination, 6 minutes. I watched as the last of the great Kethmoran dreadnoughts, ships that had been the terror of the galaxy for centuries, were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and regret. Sir, said my communications officer, we're receiving transmissions from across the system. Every inhabited planet, every space station, every colony ship. They're all asking the same question, which is, what just happened? I looked at the tactical display, where the battle was finally winding down. The Kethmoran fleet, all 200 ships of it, had been completely destroyed. The human destroyer fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. Arya, I said, broadcast the battle footage to every inhabited system within 50 light-years. Include a message. What message, sir? I thought for a moment. The message is simple. The Kethmoran threat is ended. Harmony Station and the Human Alliance are now the peacekeeping authority for this region of space. Any aggressive actions against civilian populations will be met with immediate and permanent consequences. Acknowledged. Broadcasting now. Felix walked over to me. You realize what you've just done? I've ended a war that's been going on for centuries. You've also announced to the galaxy that humans are now the local superpower. That's going to make some people nervous. I looked at the tactical display, where the expanding debris fields were all that remained of the Kethmoran fleet. Good. Let them be nervous. Maybe nervous people will think twice before starting wars. And if they don't? I gestured at the weapons displays, at the fleet command systems, at the overwhelming military power that the humans had somehow managed to install in less than 48 hours. Then we'll remind them why they should be nervous. Felix grinned. I like the way you think. Arya, I said. What's the status of the shipyards? Construction is proceeding on schedule. We should have 100 additional destroyers ready within the week. The first cruiser-class vessels will be completed in 10 days. Cruiser class? Larger ships, Rita explained. More firepower, better range, improved diplomatic facilities. Diplomatic facilities? You're going to need them. Once word of this spreads, every civilization in the galaxy is going to want to either join your alliance or figure out how to destroy you. I considered this. And you think they'll choose to join? I think they'll choose to not be on the wrong side of a war with humanity. I looked around the command center, at the humans who had somehow managed to turn a simple repair job into a complete transformation of the galactic balance of power. Dr. Carver, I have one more question. What's that? When Admiral Burke said he was sending his best people, did he know this was going to happen? Felix was quiet for a moment. Let me put it this way. When humans offer to help with a problem, we don't do things by halves. We solve the problem completely, and permanently. And the consequences? The consequences are that you now have the power to keep the peace in this part of the galaxy, whether you wanted it or not. I looked at the tactical display, where the destroyer fleet was already moving to patrol positions throughout the system. And if I decide I don't want this much power, then you hand it over to someone who does, Felix said simply. But I don't think you're going to do that. Why not? Because you've seen what happens when good people don't have the power to stop bad people. And you've seen what happens when bad people have too much power. I thought about the Kethmoran fleet, about the civilizations they'd destroyed, about the billions of innocent beings who were now safe because of what had happened here. You're right, I said. I'm not going to hand this over to someone else. Then congratulations, Felix said. You're now the most powerful military commander in about 3 spiral arms. Try not to let it go to your head. I laughed, which surprised me. Is that what humans do when they accidentally conquer star systems? Make jokes? We make jokes about everything, Rita said. It's how we deal with the fact that we're usually in way over our heads. And are you in over your heads? Felix looked at the tactical display, at the expanding debris fields, at the readings from the orbital defense platforms, and the automated shipyards and the weapon systems that could probably destroy solar systems. Probably, he said. But that's never stopped us before. Chapter 7. The Aftermath, or How to Accidentally Become a Galactic Superpower. 3 days after what the galactic news networks were calling the Kethmoran incident, I was sitting in my office trying to process approximately 4,000 requests for diplomatic meetings, alliance agreements, and what appeared to be several marriage proposals. Sir, said Vex'thari, entering with another stack of data pads, we've received formal communications from the Galactic Council. I looked up from the marriage proposal I'd been reading. Apparently, the Princess of the Hegemony of Worlds was convinced that a union between our civilizations would be mutually beneficial, and had included some rather detailed specifications about the compatibility of our reproductive systems. What does the Council want? I asked. They want to know if you're planning to conquer the galaxy. I set down the marriage proposal and rubbed my temples. And what did you tell them? I told them I'd ask you. I looked at her. Are we planning to conquer the galaxy? I don't know, sir. Are we? I considered this. On the one hand, the thought of ruling the galaxy was terrifying. On the other hand, given what I'd learned about human military capabilities, it was probably inevitable. Get me Dr. Carver, I said. A few minutes later, Felix appeared in my office, looking remarkably cheerful for someone who'd just participated in what was probably the most significant military action in galactic history. You wanted to see me? He asked. The Galactic Council wants to know if we're planning to conquer the galaxy. Felix sat down in the chair across from my desk. That's a good question, are we? I was hoping you could tell me. Well, Felix said, conquering the galaxy wasn't really on our agenda. We just came here to fix your power systems. And now? Now we've accidentally created the most powerful military force in known space, which means we're responsible for what happens next. I leaned back in my chair. And what do you think should happen next? Felix was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I think we should probably accept that we're now the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority and figure out how to do the job properly. And how do we do that? By making sure that what happened to the Kethmoran happens to anyone else who thinks genocide is an acceptable hobby. I nodded. Arya, are you monitoring this conversation? Yes, sir, the AI replied. I've been analyzing the geopolitical implications of recent events. And the destruction of the Kethmoran fleet has created a power vacuum that will need to be filled. There are approximately 47 aggressive civilizations that have been kept in check primarily by fear of Kethmoran retaliation. With the Kethmoran gone, these civilizations will likely attempt to expand their territories. Unless someone stops them, I said. Unless someone stops them, Arya agreed. I looked at Felix. How many ships do we have now? As of this morning, 150 destroyers, 12 cruisers, and 3 battleships. The shipyards are also working on something Bobby calls the Big One. What's the Big One? A dreadnought-class vessel designed specifically for what humans call making an impression. It's about 10 kilometers long and carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. 10 kilometers? Well, we figured that if we're going to be the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority, we should probably look the part. I stared at him. You built a 10-kilometer-long warship. We're building it. It won't be ready for another few weeks. And you think this is necessary? I think it's inevitable. The galaxy is going to test us. When they do, we need to be ready to respond in a way that makes it clear that testing us was a mistake. I considered this. Arya, what's your assessment of our current military capabilities? At current production rates, we will have sufficient forces to maintain peace throughout this spiral arm within 6 months. However, I should note that our capabilities are attracting attention from other regions of the galaxy. What kind of attention? The kind that comes with fleets of warships and demands for tribute. I felt a familiar chill. Who? The Hegemony of Worlds has dispatched a battle fleet to investigate our recent actions. The corporate syndicate has placed a bounty on human technology, and the Hive Collective has begun mobilizing what appears to be a full-scale invasion force. I looked at Felix. Are these people as dangerous as they sound? The Hegemony controls about 1,000 star systems, and has a military that makes the Kethmoran look like weekend warriors. The corporate syndicate has enough money to buy entire planets, and they're not particularly concerned about ethics. And the Hive Collective? Felix paused. And the Hive Collective? The Hive Collective is a species of insectoid beings that reproduce by conquering other civilizations and converting them into more insects. They've been expanding for about 10,000 years, and now they're all coming here. Apparently, word has gotten out that humans are responsible for the Kethmoran incident. They want to either recruit us or eliminate us. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the construction sites where human shipyards were working around the clock to build more warships. How long do we have? The Hegemony fleet should arrive in about 2 weeks. The corporate syndicate is already here. They've been buying up mining rights in the outer system. And the Hive Collective? Felix consulted his datapad. The Hive Collective will be here in about 6 months. 6 months to prepare for a war with a species that's been conquering the galaxy for 10,000 years. Pretty much. I turned back to Felix. Are we ready for this? Felix smiled. We're humans. We're never ready for anything. But we're very good at figuring it out as we go. And if we can't figure it out, then the galaxy gets a lot more interesting. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Arya, what's your recommendation? I recommend we accelerate ship production and begin diplomatic outreach to potential allies. We're going to need friends. And if we can't find any friends, then we'll have to make sure our enemies are too scared to fight us. I looked at the stack of diplomatic requests on my desk. It seems like we're going to be busy. Sir, Vex'thari said, there's one more thing. What's that? Admiral Burke is requesting a meeting. He says it's urgent. I looked at Felix. Did you tell him what happened? I sent him a report. He replied with a single word, which was, "Oops." I laughed, which surprised me. Get him on the line. A few minutes later, Admiral Burke's face appeared on my office display. He looked like a man who'd just discovered that his house had accidentally been converted into a nuclear weapons facility. "Vex'thari," he said. "We need to talk." "Hello, Harrison. How's Earth?" "Earth is fine. Earth is also very, very interested in what you people have been doing out there." "Your people did it," I pointed out. "My people were supposed to fix your power systems. They weren't supposed to turn you into a galactic superpower." I looked at Felix, who shrugged. Things got a little out of hand. A little out of hand. Burke's voice rose an octave. "You destroyed the Kethmoran fleet. You've got half the galaxy either terrified of you or trying to figure out how to destroy you. And the other half? The other half is trying to figure out how to marry you." I glanced at the stack of marriage proposals on my desk. I noticed. Burke was quiet for a moment. "Look, I need to know, are you planning to use this military force you've acquired?" "Only to keep the peace," I said. And if keeping the peace requires conquering a few star systems? I thought about the Kethmoran, about the civilizations they'd destroyed, about the billions of innocent beings who were now safe because of what had happened here. Then we'll conquer a few star systems. Burke nodded slowly. In that case, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about Earth's role in this new galactic order. What do you mean? I mean that if you're going to be the galactic peacekeeping authority, you're going to need the full support of humanity. And humanity is going to need to know that our friends are in charge. I looked at Felix, who was grinning. Are you offering to help us conquer the galaxy? I'm offering to help you save it, Burke replied. There's a difference. Is there? There will be, if we do this right. I looked around my office, at the displays showing the construction of warships, at the tactical readouts from the orbital defense platforms, at the marriage proposals from alien royalty. Admiral Burke, I said, I think we're going to need a bigger station. Epilogue. 6 months later, or How to End a Story Without Actually Ending Anything. 6 months later, I was standing on the observation deck of the HSS Peacemaker, looking out at the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. The surrender ceremony of the Hive Collective. The collective had arrived 3 days ago with a fleet of approximately 10,000 ships, convinced that they were about to add another civilization to their ever-expanding empire. They'd been somewhat surprised to discover that we were waiting for them with a fleet of our own. Sir, said Arya, the Hive Queen is requesting permission to speak. I looked at Felix, who was standing next to me with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just solved a particularly complex engineering problem. What do you think? I think we should hear what she has to say. I activated the communication system. This is Commander Vex'thari of the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority. You may speak. The Hive Queen's voice filled the observation deck, a sound like wind through crystal caves. You have surprised us, Commander. We did not expect to find such resistance. Resistance was probably an understatement. The Hive Collective had arrived expecting to fight a small defensive force, and had instead found themselves facing a fleet of over 1,000 ships, including the newly completed HSS Peacemaker, which was less a warship than a mobile planet with delusions of grandeur. The Hive Collective withdraws from this system, the Queen continued. We will not return. See that you don't, I replied. And Queen? Pass the word to anyone else who might be interested in testing our resolve. The galaxy is under new management. The Hive fleet began withdrawing, their ships disappearing into hyperspace one by one. Within an hour, the system was clear. Well, said Felix, that was anticlimactic. You're complaining? Not complaining? Just observing? 6 months ago, the Hive Collective was considered unstoppable. Now they're running away from a space station that used to have a broken power grid. I looked out at the fleet of human-designed ships patrolling the system. Things change. Indeed they do. Felix consulted his datapad. Speaking of which, we've got some good news and some bad news. Give me the bad news first. The corporate syndicate has been secretly building a fleet of their own. They're planning to challenge our authority in the Centauri sector. And the good news? Bobby's been working on a new weapon system. He calls it the Attitude Adjuster. I was afraid to ask. What does it do? It's designed to make aggressive civilizations more reasonable. How? By convincing them that being reasonable is more enjoyable than being dead. I laughed. And how does it do that? Very persuasively. I looked around the observation deck of the Peacemaker. The ship was enormous, 10 kilometers long, bristling with weapons, and capable of manufacturing its own fleet of support vessels. It was also, according to the humans, just the prototype. Felix, I said, I have a question. What's that? When you people first arrived at my station, did you know this was going to happen? Felix was quiet for a moment. Honestly? No. We really were just planning to fix your power systems. And now? Now we're the de facto government of about 3 spiral arms. We've got a fleet that could probably conquer the galaxy, and we're getting marriage proposals from alien royalty. Any regrets? Felix looked out at the fleet of ships, at the orbital defense platforms, at the shipyards that were already working on even larger vessels. None whatsoever. The galaxy needed someone to keep the peace. We're just lucky it turned out to be us. Lucky? Well, lucky for everyone else. Could you imagine what would have happened if the Kethmoran had gotten their hands on human technology? I shuddered. That's a terrifying thought. Which is why we're going to make sure it never happens. Arya, I said, what's our current status? All systems nominal, sir. The fleet is at full readiness. The shipyards are operating at maximum capacity, and we've received formal surrender documents from 47 different aggressive civilizations. And how many civilizations are still considering testing our resolve? Approximately 12, sir. However, projections suggest that number will drop to 0 within the next 6 months. Why? Because Bobby has agreed to demonstrate the attitude adjuster at the next Galactic Council meeting. I turned to Felix. Should I be worried about this demonstration? Only if you're planning to start a war with us. I'm not. Then you'll probably find it entertaining. I looked out at the stars, at the peaceful system where ships from dozens of different civilizations were now conducting trade and diplomacy under the protection of the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority. It was a beautiful sight. You know, I said, when I first asked you to fix my power systems, I thought the worst thing that could happen was that everyone would die. And now? Now I realize that the worst thing that could happen was that I'd have to fill out all these diplomatic forms. Felix laughed. Welcome to galactic politics. Is it always this complicated? Oh, this is just the beginning. Wait until we start getting requests to mediate trade disputes and marriage contracts. I groaned. Please tell me you're joking. I'm not. In fact, I think the Princess of the Hegemony is planning to propose to you in person at the next diplomatic summit. I looked at the stack of marriage proposals that I brought with me to the ship. Any advice? Run very fast and very far. I can't. I'm the commander of the Galactic Peacekeeping Authority. Then delegate. That's what staff is for. I looked around at the observation deck, at the crew of humans and aliens working together to maintain the peace in 3 spiral arms, at the fleet of ships that represented the most powerful military force in galactic history. You know what? I said. I think we're going to be just fine. Of course we are, Felix replied. We're humans. We don't know how to do anything halfway. And that's a good thing? It's the best thing. Trust me. I looked out at the stars and smiled. 6 months ago, I'd been the commander of a failing space station with outdated technology and a rapidly approaching deadline. Now I was the commander of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, with enough firepower to keep the peace whether people wanted it or not. Somehow asking the humans for help had turned out to be the best decision I'd ever made, even if it had completely changed the course of galactic history. But that's humans for you. Ask them to fix your power systems, and they'll give you upgrades, a war fleet, and accidentally make you the ruler of 3 spiral arms. Not bad for a repair job. The end.